The alarms wailed like wounded animals, shrill enough to cut through steel. Fort Horizon's corridors flashed red, bulkheads sealed, and the vibration of plasma fire rattled every plate in the orbital station. Captain Elias Veyra ran toward the command deck, boots pounding against the deck plates. His squad trailed behind, raw recruits in dented armor, still carrying the nervous tension of students rather than soldiers. The Dominion had chosen its moment perfectly, striking when half the senior officers were planetside for a briefing. The station shuddered as a gunship slammed into the docking bay. Metal screamed. Overhead lights flickered. Elias didn't slow. "On me, squad. Helmet sealed, safety's off. This isn't a drill." Private Kellen, the youngest in the group, swallowed audibly through the comms. "Sir, are we really under attack? I thought Dominion fleets were still months out." "They're early," Elias said, voice sharp but calm. "That just means we get extra practice." The recruits looked at each other wide-eyed. He saw it in their posture, the temptation to panic, to freeze. Elias didn't allow it. Panic was death. Focus was survival. The squad reached the armory. The smell of oil and metal filled the air as they grabbed rifles, grenades, and emergency shield packs. Elias clipped a blade to his thigh, a habit carried over from his years fighting in the Pacific wastes. Through the viewport, he caught sight of the alien ships. Sleek, obsidian hulls shimmered as they poured out waves of fighters. The Dominion didn't waste time with negotiations or ultimatums. They wanted fear, surrender. Humanity wasn't going to give them either. "Listen up," Elias barked, drawing every eye. "They think this is war. We call it training. Every second you survive is one more lesson they can't erase. Remember that." The words settled like steel into their spines. Jitters turned into grim determination. They snapped helmets on, rifles ready. The docking bay door erupted inward, molten shards spinning across the floor. Dominion troopers surged through, tall insectoid warriors clad in bone-like armor, weapons humming with alien energy. Their movements were mechanical, precise, terrifying. Elias fired first. His plasma round caught the lead trooper in the chest, staggering it just long enough for Corporal Marek to finish it with a shot to the head. "Cover left!" Elias ordered, swinging behind a cargo crate. The recruits scattered into positions, firing with uneven accuracy. Two nearly broke formation until Elias barked them back into line. Training took over. Muscle memory replaced fear. Slowly, the humans pushed the aliens back step by bloody step. "Grenade out!" Kellen shouted, tossing a sphere into the cluster of Dominion. The blast shredded the corridor, scattering alien bodies across the floor. Elias allowed himself a grin beneath the helmet. That's how it's done. Keep the rhythm. Strike, adapt, repeat. The aliens pressed harder. Their drones buzzed overhead, spitting plasma fire. Elias vaulted from cover, grabbed a drone mid-swoop, and slammed it against the floor. Sparks exploded as he wrenched free its targeting module. With a few quick adjustments, he reprogrammed it. The drone rose shakily and turned its fire against its former masters. Marek let out a low whistle. "Sir, you do realize that's not in the manual?" "Manuals are for people planning to lose," Elias shot back. The battle spread across the station. Chatter filled comms as other squads reported being overrun. Elias ignored the static of dying voices, focusing on the fight in front of him. If his squad broke, the whole deck would collapse. They fought through the corridor, clearing room after room, each firefight a crucible. Recruits who entered the battle trembling were now steady, eyes hard behind visors. Elias kept their momentum alive with sharp orders and dark humor. At one point, Private Roan ducked too long under fire. Elias yanked him up by the collar. "You want to live forever? Get back in the fight." By the time they reached the command deck, smoke hung thick in the air. Consoles sparked. Officers barked into headsets, and the holographic display showed a swarm of Dominion ships encircling the station. Admiral Reed turned to Elias. "They're not testing us. This is annihilation." Elias shook his head. "No, this is their mistake. They're teaching us how they fight." The Admiral studied him a beat, then gave a curt nod. "Very well. Take your squad to the eastern breach. Hold it, or we lose half the station." They moved out again, lungs burning, armor scuffed, but their pace never faltered. The Eastern Breach was chaos incarnate, Dominion forces flooding through, humans fighting tooth and nail to hold the line. Elias leapt onto a toppled bulkhead, waving his squad forward. "Form up! Shields front, rifles back!" We're not giving them one more meter. The fight turned brutal. Hand-to-hand clashes broke out as the aliens pressed hard. Elias's blade sang through the air, cutting deep into carapace armor. Grenades boomed. Plasma fire scorched walls. The station itself groaned under the strain. Then the alien reinforcements withdrew as suddenly as they had come. The bay went eerily quiet, bodies, human and alien, littering the floor. Smoke curled toward the shattered ceiling. Elias stood panting, blood streaked across his armor. His squad, battered but alive, gathered around him. Their eyes shone with something new. Belief. The holographic projector in the bay flickered to life, casting the image of Overlord Kael'tor. The alien's elongated skull and cruel mandibles glowed in the blue light. His voice was a rasp of thunder. "Humans, do not delude yourselves. This is no training. This is extermination. We will grind your species into dust until nothing remains but ash." Elias stepped forward, visor cracked, face smeared with soot. He stared straight into the alien's image, unflinching. "Then you're our instructors," he said. His voice carried through the bay, firm, defiant. "And every lesson you throw at us only makes us stronger." For a heartbeat, silence held. Then Kael'tor's image vanished, leaving only static. Elias turned to his squad. "You heard the man." "Class is in session." The recruits laughed. Raw, shaken laughter, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was fire. The war had begun, and humanity had just chosen how to fight it. Sleep became a rumor on Fort Horizon. Weeks blurred into a cycle of alarms, deployments, and recovery drills that felt more like knife-edge battles than rehearsals. To the Dominion, each assault was a hammer striking to break. To humanity, each strike was heat and pressure, shaping steel. Captain Elias Veyra lived in that forge. His squad had survived the first attack, but survival wasn't enough anymore. They needed mastery. Training chambers glowed with artificial suns. Gravity twisted and pulsed, fluctuating between crushing weights and weightlessness. Recruits stumbled under the shifting loads until Elias barked them back to their feet. "Every second you stay down is a second you're dead," he said, voice carrying through the comms. "Stand, adapt, repeat." Private Kellen staggered upright, sweat streaming down his brow inside the helmet. He clenched his rifle like a lifeline, but his stance was steadier now. Corporal Merrick leaned against a bulkhead, watching the recruits strain. "They're burning out, Captain." "Even machines need downtime." Elias shook his head. "Machines break. Humans don't. We bend, we twist, we curse the stars, but we don't break." He wasn't sure if he said it for Merrick or for himself. The Dominion didn't give them long to rest. A coded transmission crackled through command channels. An assault brewing on Mars. Dominion carriers were already dropping troops into the sprawling city of New Cydonia. If the colony fell, Earth would lose its foothold on the frontier. Elias's squad was deployed before sunrise. The transport shuttle rumbled through atmosphere, rattling like a tin can under Dominion fire. Through the small viewport, Elias saw Mars burning, skylines punctured by plasma strikes, dust storms lit by fire. Roan muttered, "Looks like hell decided to settle down here." Elias checked his weapon and answered flatly, "Then we'll be the fire brigade." The shuttle slammed down hard enough to rattle teeth. The ramp dropped, and they poured into chaos. Dominion troopers moved in disciplined formations, pressing civilians against barricades, their drones circling overhead like vultures. Elias's squad fanned out through the ruins, using collapsed buildings as cover. Plasma blasts lit the night red. The sharp smell of ozone and scorched stone hung in the air. "Flank left," Elias ordered. "Hit them where they don't expect us." Merrick's rifle cracked, taking down a drone. Kellen followed with precise bursts that scattered the troopers. Civilians broke free, running for cover. Elias caught one by the arm, an older man with soot-blackened face, and shoved him toward safety. "Go! Keep your head down!" The man stammered thanks before vanishing into the smoke. The squad pushed deeper into the city, turning alleys into killing grounds. Elias's instincts sharpened with every corner. He wasn't fighting like a tactician anymore. He was fighting like a teacher, every maneuver drilled into his squad until their movements flowed like water. A Dominion platoon cornered them near the mag rail tracks, heavy armor glinting under floodlights. For a moment, the squad hesitated. The enemy looked invincible, weapons humming with lethal energy. Elias stepped forward, rifle raised. Remember, they're not gods. They're teachers, and they just volunteered for class. The recruits laughed, short and tense, but it was enough to break the fear. They fought with fury, grenades exploding against armored troopers, rifles cutting through the gaps. Elias moved like a blade himself, fast, decisive, relentless. By the time the last alien fell, the mag rail was littered with broken armor. Elias wiped blood from his visor and said almost to himself, "Lesson passed." News spread faster than fire. Human squads across Mars had turned Dominion advances into pyres. For every street lost, another was retaken with ingenuity the aliens didn't predict. Dominion commanders, accustomed to straightforward conquest, now found themselves bogged down in a city that refused to kneel. In a distant warship orbiting Mars, Overlord Kael'Tor's mandibles clicked with fury. He struck one of his aides to the floor. "Explain to me how primitives defy us with sticks and stolen drones." The aide stammered, "They adapt, Overlord. Every tactic we deploy, they counter. It is as if they learn," Kael'Tor hissed. His gaze narrowed on the hollow map, where clusters of human resistance glowed like embers refusing to die. "They call slaughter training. This arrogance will not stand." Back on the ground, Elias's squad found rare quiet in the wreckage of a marketplace. Fires still burned, but for the first time in days, no Dominion shadows moved. Kellen sat heavily on a crate, helmet off, face pale. "Sir, how long can we keep this up? Feels like every fight just spawns another." Elias knelt across from him, resting an arm on his rifle. "How long can you breathe?" "As long as you need to. War's no different. You take the next breath, then the next. Suddenly you realize you've lived long enough to win," Roan chuckled weakly. "That's bleak motivation, Captain." "It's the only kind that works," Elias said. "They think we're breaking. But we're not breaking, we're sharpening. Every fight makes the next easier." Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of fire. They all knew the truth. Each battle cost lives, and the Dominion wasn't slowing. But for the first time, the squad didn't look hollow-eyed. They looked hardened. By week's end, the Dominion retreated from Mars. They hadn't been defeated outright, but their offensive stalled against resistance they couldn't comprehend. Back aboard Fort Horizon, Elias stood at the viewport watching alien ships pull back into dark space. His reflection in the glass looked older, sharper. Merrick joined him, arms crossed. "You think they'll give up?" Elias shook his head. "Not a chance. They're not beaten, they're insulted. They'll come back with more." "Then what happens?" Elias's jaw tightened. "Then we learn faster." Far across the void, Kael'Tor stared into the endless night of space. His claws scraped against the armrest of his throne. "Humans think themselves students in war," he growled. "We will remind them students bleed like anyone else. Assemble the fleet. Next time, they will not rise." His commanders bowed low, fear quivering in their limbs. Kael'Tor leaned forward, voice cold. "This delusion ends. We will drown their training in fire." On Fort Horizon, Elias gathered his squad one final time before rest cycles. Their armor was battered, their faces hollowed by exhaustion, but their eyes glowed with something unshakable. "You've seen the worst they can throw," he told them. "And you're still here. That means you've earned your place in this war. Remember, every fight is a lesson, and if we keep learning, there's not a damn thing in this galaxy that can stop us." Kellen raised his rifle in a silent salute. Roan followed, then Merrick, until every member of the squad echoed the gesture. Outside, the stars looked peaceful. But humanity had redefined peace, not the absence of war, but the presence of endurance. The forge burned on, and humans only grew sharper within it. Earth's sky burned with false stars. Thousands of Dominion ships emerged from warp, blotting constellations with black hulls. Their formation stretched from horizon to horizon, a living wall of steel and fire. Fort Horizon's sensors shrieked warnings across every channel. On the command deck, Captain Elias Veyra studied the display. The sheer scale was staggering. An armada meant not for conquest, but for erasure. Yet his pulse stayed steady. Fear had long since turned into fuel. "They brought everything," Corporal Merrick muttered, his voice low but grimly amused. "Guess we're finally worth the effort." Elias tightened his gauntlet. "Good. Means we'll get the best lesson yet." The crew moved with sharp efficiency. Stations lit with red indicators, weapons primed, defense grids spinning awake across Earth orbit. The Terran Defense Accord had prepared for this day, but few expected it to come so soon, or at this scale. The intercom crackled. Admiral Ree's voice cut through the din. "All stations, all squadrons, engage at will. Hold Earth at any cost." The battle began with silence. Then the void erupted. Beams of plasma carved arcs through the black. Torpedoes streaked past, trailing light. Dominion fighters poured forward like locusts, slamming into Earth's defense lines. Human ships rose to meet them, frigates darting between cruisers, fighters cutting sharp angles, improvising maneuvers that no Dominion manual predicted. Elias led his squad aboard the carrier Resolute, coordinating defense of a key orbital shield array. From the hangar, he could see the planet below, its oceans glimmering faintly through gaps in fire. "Squad, gear up," Elias ordered. "This array falls, Earth burns." Private Kellen checked his rifle, jaw set. "Understood, sir." They launched into boarding pods, slamming across space into Dominion hulls. The first impact rattled bones. The hatch blew open, spilling them into the belly of a cruiser crawling with alien troopers. Blades met rifles in a storm of close combat. The air smelled of burned metal and alien ichor. Elias moved like a shadow with weight, every strike precise, every command clipped. "Roan, cut left." "Merrick, cover him!" The squad flowed with him, each movement sharper than the last. They weren't recruits anymore. They were soldiers tempered by fire. On the Dominion flagship, Overlord Kael'tor watched with mounting rage. His mandibles ground together as he studied human resistance on the holo map. "They improvise again," one of his aides whispered. "Our predictive models fail." Kael'tor's claws dug furrows into the throne's armrest. "Then crush them without prediction. Drown them! I will lead myself." The command deck fell silent as the Overlord rose, towering and armored in obsidian plating. If humans wanted a lesson, he would be the one to teach it. Hours of brutal fighting blurred into minutes. The orbital array remained intact, but casualties mounted. Elias's squad pressed deeper into the Dominion cruiser, planting charges along its reactor conduits. When the detonators armed, Elias gave the signal. "Time to leave." They sprinted back through smoke-filled corridors. Explosions ripped behind them, tearing the alien ship apart from within. Their pod barely cleared the hull before fire consumed the cruiser. Back aboard Resolute, the squad stripped helmets, faces streaked with sweat and soot. Breathing hard, Kellen managed a grin. "That's one down." "Thousands to go," Merrick replied, but there was pride in his voice. The respite didn't last. Command alarms blared. Kael'tor's flagship had broken through Earth's lines, carving a path straight toward the shield array. Elias's gut tightened. This wasn't strategy, it was personal. Kael'tor wanted to strike where Elias stood. The flagship loomed like a floating fortress, its weapons tearing through Terran cruisers. Elias's squad launched again, pods slamming into the beast's armored skin. They breached a hangar, fighting through elite Dominion guard. These soldiers moved with inhuman precision, their strikes nearly overwhelming. Elias countered with unpredictability, shifting tempo, feinting, using the environment. His squad mirrored him, turning every corner into advantage. At last, they reached the core chamber, a cathedral of energy pulsing with alien light. And waiting there, massive and imposing, stood Overlord Kael'tor. His voice rumbled like stone cracking. "So this is humanity's champion. A scrap of flesh dressed in steel." Elias leveled his rifle. "Not a champion, just a student." Kael'tor laughed, the sound harsh. "Then prepare for your final lesson." The duel ignited. Kael'tor's blade, jagged and glowing, slashed with crushing force. Elias dodged, countering with quick bursts of fire. Sparks rained as steel clashed against alien alloy. Merrick and the others held off Dominion elites at the chamber's edge, giving Elias space. But Kael'tor pressed harder, strikes raining like thunder. "You cannot endure!" the Overlord snarled, forcing Elias back toward the reactor. Elias's arms trembled under the weight of the blade. His visor cracked from the impact, but his eyes burned steady. "Endure. That's all we do." With sudden ferocity, he drove his blade into Kael'tor's side. The Overlord roared, staggered, and Elias seized the moment. "Squad, now!" he shouted. Charges detonated across the chamber. Energy flared, systems failing. The flagship shuddered, alarms wailing. Kael'tor struck again, but his movements slowed, wounded and enraged. Elias planted a final shot into the Overlord's chest, sending him crashing to one knee. Not dead, but broken, forced to retreat as the flagship lurched violently. "Time to go," Elias ordered. The squad sprinted back to the pods, launching out as the flagship reeled under catastrophic failure. From Resolute, Elias watched the Dominion vessel stagger, flames tearing through its spine. Kael'tor's fleet faltered, ships pulling back into warp as their leader vanished from the battlefield. Earth had survived. Bloodied, scarred, but unbroken. On the deck, Elias removed his cracked helmet, gazing at the blue curve of the planet below. His squad gathered around him, silent in the weight of what they'd done. At last, Elias spoke, voice hoarse but firm. "They'll never understand. For us, every fight is training. And training only makes us stronger." Kellen let out a tired laugh. "Class dismissed?" Elias smiled faintly. "Until the next lesson." They stood together at the viewport. Battered soldiers turned into sharpened steel, watching Earth spin in the light of victory. Humanity had not only endured, it had learned. And that meant the war was just beginning. The smoke of victory lingered far longer than the battle itself. Earth was safe for the moment, but the scars were carved deep. Cities on the surface bore the marks of orbital strikes, craters smoldering where neighborhoods once stood, seas poisoned by debris raining from the sky. Above, ship graveyards drifted silently, Terran and Dominion wrecks locked together in twisted embraces. Captain Elias Veyra stood on Fort Horizon's outer deck, helmet under his arm, staring through the shattered remains of orbit. The Dominion had retreated, but it didn't feel like triumph. Not yet. Merrick approached quietly, one hand wrapped in a bandage. "You look like hell, Captain." "Feels accurate," Elias muttered. Merrick glanced at the stars, then back at him. "We held Earth. That's more than anyone thought possible." Elias gave a faint, humorless smile. "Holding isn't winning. The Dominion will regroup. Kael'tor isn't dead, just wounded. He'll come back angrier." The following days blurred with triage and salvage. The Resolute limped into dock, its hull scorched. Engineers worked non-stop, patching holes with whatever scrap they could scavenge. Medical bays overflowed. Fort Horizon smelled of antiseptic and burned circuitry. Elias's squad remained intact, though none escaped unscathed. Kellen's arm was in a sling, Roan walked with a limp, and Merrick's temper had sharpened into something close to permanent steel. During one debrief, Admiral Ree spread a star chart across the holotable. Red Dominion markers glowed across half the system. "We bloodied them, but don't be deceived. Their empire stretches across 100 worlds. This fleet was only a fraction. They'll return?" Elias leaned forward. "Then we use the time we've bought. Every encounter, every tactic we've seen, they're lessons. We build new drills, new countermeasures. Next time, we don't just hold. We strike." The Admiral studied him, eyes weary but calculating. "You think humanity can outpace an empire centuries ahead?" "Yes," Elias said without hesitation. "Because they fight by rules. We don't." The squad's days became a relentless cycle of innovation. Simulations were rewritten nightly based on Dominion maneuvers they had witnessed. Recruits practiced zero-gravity grappling, shield-breaking tactics, even improvised hacking of alien drones. Kellen, usually reserved, grew obsessed with captured Dominion tech. He dismantled a plasma rifle on the mess table, ignoring the protests of cooks. Roan shook his head. "One wrong spark and you'll cook us all." Kellen didn't look up. "Then I'll know what not to do next time." Elias watched with approval. "Keep at it. Every mistake we make here saves a life later," Merrick smirked. "Guess that makes our barracks the most valuable classroom in the galaxy." But not everyone saw humanity's survival as victory. On Earth, factions argued bitterly. Some wanted negotiations, believing survival depended on appeasement. Others demanded a full-scale offensive to prove dominance. Protests filled streets. Conspiracy broadcasts claimed the war was a fabrication to unify divided governments. Elias followed the reports in silence. Soldiers bled to keep the world alive while civilians bickered about what survival meant. Yet he couldn't fault them. Fear gnawed differently when you weren't holding a rifle. One night, while his squad rested, Elias sat alone in the observation chamber. Below, Earth's oceans shimmered, reflecting streaks of burning wreckage still falling through atmosphere. Admiral Ree entered quietly. "You never sleep?" Elias shrugged. "Feels like a waste when tomorrow isn't guaranteed." The Admiral studied him. "Your men follow you because you make them believe survival is strength. But you also carry the weight alone. That kind of burden crushes commanders." Elias finally turned. "I'm not trying to be unbreakable. I'm trying to make sure they never doubt we can win." Ree's gaze softened, just slightly. "Then let me give you truth to carry." Intelligence intercepted Dominion transmissions. "Kale Tor is preparing a counteroffensive, not just against Earth. He's targeting the colonies." Elias's jaw tightened. "Mars and Europa, Titan. He means to erase every human foothold beyond Earth. If we lose them, we're caged." Elias leaned back against the glass, eyes narrowing. "Then we make him regret teaching us how he fights." Weeks later, the squad was redeployed to Europa. The icy moon shimmered under Jupiter's shadow, its colony domes glowing faintly against the frozen landscape. Dominion scouts had already been sighted. Inside the colony's command dome, engineers scrambled to reinforce defenses. Elias's squad moved among them, setting up choke points, wiring traps, preparing civilians for evacuation. Kellen crouched near a console, coaxing life from the salvaged drone he'd been tinkering with for days. Sparks flared, then the drone hummed awake, optics glowing faint blue. He looked up, grinning despite exhaustion. "It listens to us now. We can turn their own eyes against them." Elias clapped his shoulder. "Good work. That's one more tool they won't expect." Roan, tightening a barricade, muttered, "Feels like we're students stealing answers from the teacher's desk." "Exactly," Elias said. "And by the time they realize, we'll be writing the exams." The Dominion attack came as predicted. Sleek warships descending through Europa's thin atmosphere, fire streaking against ice. Alien troops swarmed toward the domes, weapons blazing. Elias's squad met them head-on. The drone Kellen had reprogrammed darted through the air, feeding them enemy positions, disrupting formations. Merrick's traps detonated, collapsing ice tunnels onto advancing soldiers. Civilians fled through escape corridors, while the squad bought every precious second. Amid the chaos, Elias's comm crackled with a transmission. The voice was unmistakable. "Kale Tor, harsh and cold. Human. Still breathing, I see. Do you believe your training will save you here?" Elias ducked behind cover, plasma fire scarring the wall above. He opened the channel, voice steady. "Training doesn't save us. It shapes us. And it makes sure you'll never see the same move twice." Kaltor's growl rumbled through the comm. "You mistake persistence for strength. I will burn your colonies until even your ashes forget you existed." Elias smiled grimly, firing back at advancing troopers. "Then you'd better burn fast. Because every time you fail, we get better. And eventually, we'll be the ones teaching." The transmission cut, but the threat hung heavy. By night's end, Europa still stood. The colony domes cracked but intact, its people alive. Dominion forces retreated once more, unwilling to waste more troops on resistance that refused to break. Elias's squad stood in the wreckage, armor battered, rifles empty, but alive. Snow fell softly through ruptured ceilings, hissing as it touched still-burning metal. Kellen whispered, "If this is training, I don't want to know what graduation looks like." Merrick chuckled darkly. "Graduation's the day we send them running for good." Elias looked up at Jupiter's vast shape looming over them, then back at his squad. Graduation's not a day. It's the moment they realize we were never students. We were becoming instructors all along. The squad exchanged tired, grim smiles. The war wasn't over. It was only changing shape, and with every battle, humanity's edge grew sharper. The forge had spread from Earth to the colonies, and no Dominion fire could extinguish it now. Beginning.